started this build, I knew that I wanted to have a very detailed downtown city scene, and I knew that that was going to be very challenging to do, but I was up for the challenge, and I still am. And what I wanted to do was a lot of things that were very different and things that I don't think have ever really been done before in this game, or maybe only touched on before. And I think there's a reason why most people don't do very detailed downtown city scenes, and most people tend to stick with rural scenes and countryside scenes. And we're gonna kind of see a little bit of that in this episode. Today we're gonna spend a lot of time in the main downtown area. I wanted to take a break from the farmland territory and come back to the city scenery and do some serious detailing and try to expand the city a little bit, because we're kind of lacking. We've only got 1 or 2 blocks outside of the radius of the railroad tracks actually laid out. So today in episode number 6 here on the Dry Brook in Esopus Valley, we're going to spend some time laying out details just like this. So lots of roadways, lots of traffic signals, and lots of road markings are in store for this episode. And I had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm nowhere near complete. By the end of this episode, I don't actually end up expanding much of the city. I think I add 1 block, maybe 2 blocks. But the amount of details that I add in there, I think, is going to be very representative of the kind of detail level that I want to achieve with the rest of the map, or the rest of the city scene, in various layers as we move away from the main railroad track areas and the main areas where you're actually going to be looking. Because as I always say, I try to keep in mind these sort of things where your main focus is mostly going to be around the train tracks. But for me, I play this game a little bit differently than most people do, I think, in that I kind of play this a little bit more as a SimCity game or a City Skylines type game, where I spend a lot of time detailing scenes that aren't necessarily the scenes that are going to be up front and center. And what I mean by that is on a model railroad or any other type of layout like this or route in the game or in real life, your main focus is typically the main rail corridor, and that's about it. Model railroads tend to have scenes that are maybe 2 or 3 feet, maybe 4 feet at the max in depth, and basically just cover where the tracks are and then a little bit of the surrounding scenery to kind of add a little bit of a place and time, so to speak, a little setting to it. I really like to detail outside of the scenes, outside of the rail scenes. One of my favorite things about model railroading and routes and stuff like that is actually just kind of going away from the tracks and seeing what else is out there and kind of exploring the world. So I kind of play this game sort of like that, where I go way out of the edge, way out of the boundaries, and I add details here and there, and they're almost kind of like little Easter eggs, I guess, for players who kind of want to go on an adventure and wander around the city. And I was talking to some people on my Discord about this. This map, for me, it's fictional, and it does have some elements that are based in reality, but this, for me, is it's like a painting. So this is just my artistic representation. Again, it doesn't represent a real actual place. It does have a lot of basis in reality, but it's not meant to represent a specific actual location. And none of the scenes that I create are actually meant to represent something specific as well. This is just sort of my interpretation. I believe if this was art school or art class, this would be impressionistic art, I believe, or an impressionistic type painting. This is just me kind of taking the world as I see it and bringing it into, some kind of a medium. And apparently, Trainz is kind of my medium right now. So having said that, I guess I'll talk a little bit about what I'm actually specifically doing. So a lot of what I wanted to do with this map was experiment with these splineless roads, and just using pavement markings and asphalt textures and sidewalk splines and stuff like that to actually outline the parameters of where streets are supposed to be versus parking lots and turnoffs and things like that. And so far, I'm really happy with the results, but holy cow, does it get complicated in a little bit with just the amount of spline points that you could already see it on screen here. And it just gets worse. It gets worse from here, and it gets very, very difficult, to the point where I think about halfway through here, I begin to move some of the spline points to their own layer, because I needed to be able to like turn them on and off and hide them or lock them so that I can move around sidewalks or other spline points like fences or grass splines or anything like that. So it began to get really complicated. but I'm just so happy with the way that it looks because it's almost a seamless, it is seamless, it's a seamless way of laying out roads that can interact with each other and interact with parking lots and adjacent, parking lots and other things like that, lots in general. It's just a really great way to be able to interact, to have one continuous road or something like that interact with multiple roadways is what I'm trying to say. And the level of detail that you can incorporate in here is just really, really cool. And using invisible roadways to actually bring traffic into this is going to be, that's kind of the next thing. I don't touch on that here in this episode, but we're going to do that soon, and I'll get to that in a few minutes talking about it. But the main thing is, it allows a lot of flexibility, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in terms of what kind of details you can include. The width of the roads, as you'll see in some places, I've got some really kind of wonky intersections where this is not a perfect grid in some places. Some of these roads don't actually match up perfectly square. And if you had this laid out with splines, you wouldn't be able to really have a very fluid road transition or block transition. It would look a little bit wonky. But doing it in this way allows for a lot of flexibility, where I can have blocks that are just different shapes and intersections that don't quite line up, but do line up and kind of, are just their own sort of design element, so to speak. And you'll see that in a few moments here. I do get a little distracted. Instead of just like lining up the roads and putting out the lines and stuff like that, the road markings, I do start bringing in a lot of details. As I was saying, a lot of these stop signs. I'm really going crazy with these parking signs, these no parking anytime signs, no parking between signs, 2-hour parking, bus lane. I'm trying to incorporate as much stuff as possible. Part of that is because right now my wife is down in New York City and I'm not. I'm up here in Rochester still, and I'm just thinking to myself about being down in the city again myself, and all the things that kind of make up like all these little characteristic scenes around the city. So I had a lot of that in mind. You'll certainly see a lot of that influence in here in just a moment when I start stacking up some parking signs and adding construction sites and things like that. But going into the future, I do intend, and I talked about this I think in the first episode, I do intend on adding an actual traffic on the roads. And I haven't quite figured out specifically how I'm going to do that. I know I'm going to use invisible roads, and there's associated invisible road markings, or invisible roads to go with these road markings. So I will be using those. They have various speed limits and things like that, and you can kind of drag them around. I actually have some already on, laid out in the roadways here, but they're invisible right now because I put them on their own layer, just to get them out of the way, because it was just, like I said, becoming very chaotic. But I do intend on adding those, and I do add a lot of these traffic lights in this video, a lot of regular traffic control traffic lights. And what I intend to do, and I kind of have an idea of how to do it, but it's going to be really, really complicated. What I intend to do is somehow have a way for the traffic to actually interact with traffic lights that will change in sequence on the road. And I think I'm going to do this using some Atlas or ATLS, the stoppers and whatever, the whole traffic system combined with TRC. I kind of have a vague idea of how I can do that, using some invisible trains to kind of trigger events, and you can kind of act as the wiring and logic system, I guess, so to speak. I'm probably explaining it really poorly, and I think this is something that I'm probably going to futz around with during a live stream soon. I haven't scheduled that yet, but probably the next live stream that I do, which will hopefully be pretty soon, we'll be trying to troubleshoot that and attack that and figure out exactly how we're going to actually trigger these road traffic lights and trigger the traffic to actually interact with the traffic lights at the appropriate times, and have it wired up. And like I said, I kind of have a vague idea of how to do it. I haven't done any experimenting like off camera or anything like that, but that is something that I intend to do. So anyway, continuing on with the detailing work here, I'm just adding in some lanes. This is another really great option for for doing it this sort of way, is that you can add turning lanes and other traffic lanes if you want a 2-lane road or a 4-lane road or a 3-lane road or something kind of odd. It's very easy to sort of cut that in and make it look natural. So I really like that flexibility. I think that is just really awesome. Again, for me, like, this is something that almost feels like a City Skylines sort of thing or a SimCity sort of thing to do. But I'm doing it in Trainz, and I'm trying to make it work. I guess it's kind of experimental. I'm sure somebody else out there has done this or tried it. I'm not saying that I'm the first, but I'm definitely probably one of the first to be experimenting it with on video in front of like a bunch of people here. So I definitely like the look of that, and again, that's something that I'm going to incorporate a lot of. One of the downsides that I've been kind of coming up to and trying to figure out what to do with and how to deal with is there's some areas where you have to use spline roads. You can't always just use these splineless roads. I mean, maybe you can, maybe there's a way to do it. I haven't experimented too much with it, but I feel like if you don't have a barrier, like a sidewalk or some kind of a solid thing to actually denote where the edge of the road is, I don't really know if it'll look right, and especially on roads that turn or go on angles, like a diagonal, 45-degree diagonals across the grid. I don't know how well that's going to work. So in certain instances, you have to use splines, and I do have some spline roads mixed in here, and kind of like trying to blend the two together is not easy. It doesn't quite look right, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do it. I might have to build some kind of a view block or something like that on the areas where there's going to be a transition from a spline road to a non-spline road. I haven't really decided how I'm going to do that, but that's something I'll work out, and as soon as I figure it out, I'll let you guys know. So still going forward, adding some more trash and debris and very New York City looking things like the newspaper dispensers. I don't know, are they called dispensers? Newspaper thingies. I wanted to integrate some parked trucks on the road here, and I think that this road is maybe a little bit too narrow, so I may shift the yellow line. This is me kind of like checking the width of the road. It's pretty narrow. It definitely reminds me of some roads in Brooklyn where there really shouldn't have been shoulder parking or, on road parking, but there was. I also wish there was some signs that said trucks loading or unloading only. That might have been something interesting to do too, but some instances like that, I might shift the yellow markings off to one side or the other so that maybe there's parking on one side of the road instead of both sides of the road. It's definitely something that I've considered. And again, we'll probably be messing around with, mostly off camera. Again, I try to keep my videos sort of fluid and moving forward, so I'm not, derping around too much with trying to find assets or screwing around with things, trying to figure out what to do. So I try to keep it consistent and fluid. So at this point now, I'm bringing in some different asphalt textures here, using the Toomey or however you say this guy's name. These asphalt textures, which so far have been the best ones that I've come across. In terms of their variety and the way that they blend together and just the way that they look. So if there's something better out there, I'll switch to it. But for now, these are looking really good. And they just, like, the roads just look so much better after putting these down. It just adds a lot more character to the road once it's kind of cracked and patched and has holes and manholes and stuff like that. So I definitely really, really enjoy doing that. And here's another scene right here that is reminiscent of New York City. I happened to stumble across these scaffolding splines when I was looking for something else. I don't even remember what detail I was looking for, but I came across these and I was like, oh man, this is perfect. Let me put this on front of a building here and make this sort of like a little construction site. Maybe they're gutting this building. And then I found this little plaque thing, this plywood, whatever, construction site sign. So I figured, you know what, this is going to be a cool scene. Let's sort of integrate this and detail this up a little bit. And I'm sure this won't be the last one that's like this. I'll probably do a few more, especially like with just the scaffolding. Maybe there's just scaffolding in some building, in front of some buildings and not others, without there being a full-blown construction site. So at this point, for whatever reason, I think I was ready to end the video right around there. But I had a little bit of extra time to record, and I was like, you know what? Let's just do the whole length of this road. Why am I gonna do just half of this road? Let me go the whole length. So At this point, I'm just moving my way all the way down this main street and beginning to put down the crosswalks and all of the traffic lights. Something to point out with the traffic lights is they are positioned a little bit weird. I know a lot of people are going to comment and say that the traffic light should be on the other side of the street from where the cars are supposed to stop, and that is correct. And for the most part, that's the way that I have the lights situated. But in some intersections like the one that you're seeing here, it felt like the traffic light was way too far away from where the traffic was supposed to stop. So I moved it closer. I know that's going to be like very awkward for the driver, and they're going to be like breaking their neck to actually see the traffic light, but that does exist. Not every traffic light is positioned perfectly in the real world. So, there are exceptions to the rule. So this is a few of them. And I think if this was the real world and these traffic lights were in the real, situated like that, they'd probably be strung across the intersection and hung by a wire. At this point, I'm adding like a little bus lane in here. And I wanted to just color it different. I think this is something that you see quite a bit. I guess, you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, that's something that you see more today. And this route is supposed to take place in the early 90s. But you know what, I'm going to leave it because I like it. And it definitely differentiates where the bus is supposed to be. Right here, I was having a little bit of Z-clipping. So what I did was I just adjusted instead of adjusting the height of the word bus, the asset, because it would only go up in 0.5 meters or 0.10 meters. And that was too high, it was floating. What I did was I just adjusted the ground underneath just a little tiny bit by just a fraction, and it was just enough to get the Z-clipping to go away. So I guess that's a little bit of a trick if you're ever trying to put down a road marking or something like that and you're getting that Z-clipping. Just do a little bit of tweaking with the height of the terrain, and hopefully that should clear it up, or the spline, it was going on top of the spline too. So there's also these cool road markings on the download station, these turning arrows, which I am making use of, and I definitely really like them. In a moment, I will kind of kit bash them, so to speak, to make some different sort of shaped arrows and stuff, which you'll see in a moment. But just continuing along with these road markings, I don't really know what else to say about the road markings. They're great, and they look really, really great. They're rated home on this route. And I think they'd be rated home at pretty much anybody's route if you know how to use them and where to use them. They come in two different sizes. There's a 10-inch, I believe, and an 8-inch. Or is it 6 and 8-inch? I can't remember, and I can't read it on my preview monitor here. But the two different widths are for, I guess, crosswalks or, shoulder markings. So very good to use for these different situations. So now this is an intersection that I am really happy with how it turned out. Like this is a really cool intersection, and it's very New Yorky in my head. But yeah, as you can see, the left-hand side is only one lane. We've got the right-hand side is 2 lanes. And if you look at the intersection, this is one of these intersections that's kind of like offset. It's not perfectly square or anything like that. And it also intersects with a spline road. So this is another one of those kind of weird, quirky spots. But here you can see me combining these 2 road markings to make a straight and a turn arrow lane. So traffic can go straight or make a left-hand turn, while the traffic in the right lane is supposed to make a right-hand turn. So I really like the way that turned out, and I continue to add some more details to the corner, just to sort of emphasize the downtown city kind of look. The railroad tracks are just adjacent to this. And it's kind of funny to actually have a whole episode here where I didn't even touch anything with the train tracks or any Trainz stuff. I guess that goes right back to my initial point about how I play this game, and I don't play it like a normal Trainz, or I'm playing it more like a Sim City. But anyway, I digress. So at this point, I was trying to add some more markings to this kind of complicated intersection, but it just didn't look right. I've seen it a lot of like weird intersections like this. They'll put some kind of like guidelines in there about where the traffic could go and that sort of thing, but I just said forget it. It was getting too complicated, and I wasn't really sure how to do it, so I was like, forget it. It's fine. And now on this little corner here, I wanted to add a small parking lot. I figured, if there used to be a building here and it burned down or something like that, what's a better use than for some public parking? And I think that it's only like 3 parking spots that I could squeeze in there. But it looks cool. It's very New Yorky. It just definitely looks like a parking lot kind of squeezed into an abandoned lot, and I think that looks really nice in my opinion. Maybe it's used for some local businesses or local apartments or something like that. Who knows? But I do like the way that it turned out and the way that it looks. Some more details will definitely help. I didn't go really as in-depth with the details as I wanted to. That's something that I'll do at another time. More trash and signs and streetlights and things like that. But I'm really happy with how it's turning out and the way that it's looking. Some more no parking signs there just to make sure that nobody actually parks in the lane of traffic. And I think that that's going to do it for today's episode, so that's going to bring us into the cinematics. So I would like to thank you guys for watching once again. I'm really enjoying this build. I hope you guys are too. It seems like you guys are enjoying it. So thank you for watching. Enjoy the cinematics, and as always, I'll see you next time.